Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays Mastercast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean for Graduate Programs, here with your wonderful host, Ben Wiggins.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi,
What's
Ben.
good?
You know, a lot's good. How about you?
A lot's good. A lot is happening in the world that is maybe not all of it good, but there's a lot to be grateful for. And it's a beautiful day in Aggieland.
It is a beautiful day in Aggieland. We're actually getting a little bit of rain, or we did this weekend. We'll see what happens today.
Yeah, it's supposed to happen today, and I think Wednesday as well, perhaps.
Wednesday's wakeboarding day, so I'm going to pass on that rain business, but I know we need it, so I'm going to try to share.
It's always about you, Shannon.
I mean, it's been a wakeboarding drought. I went Friday a week ago, so it's been over a week and a half since I went last because there's been some challenges, and then I have this back issue going on. So I'm like really ready to go.
I hope it works out.
Thank you. Thank you for that graciousness.
That's what I'm here for.
That's right. Today on the show, we have a special guest, Ben's most special guest, but we have a special guest, Madysen Wiggins. You might recognize the last name. Madysen is many things first, but she is also Ben's wife. And so we'll get into that. Madysen graduated from Eastern Kentucky University in 2014, and she worked in higher education for 5 years before becoming a mom to Ben and Maddie's daughter, Brielle, who is now 10 months old and adorable little roly-poly. I love her.
She's the best.
Maddie's first job out of college was at Texas A&M Athletics. While she worked in that position, she received a master's in higher education administration from Sam Houston State University. And now, after Brielle was born, Maddie has started working part-time at Basecamp Farms, which some of you may know from a previous episode. Basecamp Farms is a local flower farm in Millican, just outside of College Station, and it's owned by friends of the show and the MBA programs and Mays Business School and me personally, Georgia and Jordan Monroe. So we're glad that Maddie and Georgia and Jordan are connected in that way as well.
Yes.
I just want to say I find Maddie to be so insightful. We all go to home church, home group, whatever we call it, together. And it's a small group of people, but Maddie has really helped me over, I don't even know when we started at your house, maybe a year ago. And I remember that first session so vividly. And all of it has had, everything she says has a real impact on my life. I don't know exactly why. I think it's probably because Maddie maybe just looks at the world a little bit differently than I do. She is very thoughtful and insightful, but also very practical. And I don't oftentimes find that joint insight and practical tips together in such a way that I can take what she's saying and go make a specific change in my life. And I'm incredibly grateful for Maddie for that.
Her perspective is really insightful, kind of astonishingly so sometimes. I mean, not for any particular reason. And it's just really striking the ways she finds to look at things in a different way.
I agree. And she's so vulnerable and open. Mental health is a significant priority for Maddie, as it is for all of us on the show. But really, Maddie has made that a part of her, not just personal life, but she's done some schooling in counseling and has some of the science to back up what we really care about that I find really helpful as well.
Yeah, that is definitely true.
We hope you enjoy the episode, and I'm looking forward to the outro when we get to talk about all of Maddie's great insights. Enjoy the show.
Let's roll.
We welcome Madysen Wiggins to the show. How you doing?
I'm good.
How was your weekend?
It It was great. We normally have at least something planned family-wise or just something to do, and we didn't have anything specific. So it was nice, but also as a mom now, I don't really have a lot of free time. So being at the house means like chores and cooking and getting things done. So overall, I think it was relaxing.
That's good. What is your favorite superpower?
Okay, so this is a little different. I don't know if it even counts as a real superpower, but if I could have one, this is what I would do. I'm imagining having a magic paintbrush where I could paint and change the colors of the world. So like buildings and the outside and the inside are so boring and standardized, and even like big cities have cool architecture. But I was watching this podcast once that talked about like we get real joy out of seeing color, pops of color, and she showed like what a world would look like with buildings that were all different colors. And everybody raves on Google and their awesome offices and all of that, but that's kind of that innovation. And so if I had a superpower, I would want to just like paint the town, you know, and change all the buildings from being boring and brown and brick to beautiful and colorful. And I think that walking around would become a lot more fun for people, even in cities.
I love that answer. That's a world helping superpower.
Yeah.
What a great answer.
Thanks.
Right. For our listeners, where did you grow up?
I was born in Tampa, Florida, but I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. We moved there when I was 2. And so that was kind of like my childhood, like where you're from is always Louisville, even though Florida is my origins, my parents' origins.
Okay. How many in your family?
Including my parents, there are 6 of us, so 4 kids. And then I have an older sister, and then me, younger brother, then younger sister.
What did your parents do, and how did that impact you?
My dad, he worked for the most part during my childhood as the risk manager at Papa John's in Louisville. So that's why they moved there. And then my mom, when I was born, when my sister was born until I was 2, when we were in Florida, was working at a bank. And then when we moved to Louisville, we had a chance for my mom to stay home. And so she's done that ever since. She was like stay-at-home mom for our whole childhoods. And so she was able to be flexible and pick us up from school and go to activities and that kind of thing. And so my dad's job afforded that opportunity, which was great. And we were in love with the house that we lived in all growing up, which means it was hard to leave when we moved. But I think having my mom around was really nice, and I've always valued and treasured that time. And something else that was really important to us was family dinner. So we sat down to dinner together nearly every night. We waited for my dad to get home. My mom would always like make sure that the timing of cooking dinner and having it on the table was about the time when I was going to get home. And so that was a really nice thing for us to all just be together and talk about our day and connect as a family. I know that was a huge win in terms of keeping us close and connected as we grew up.
What was your greatest challenge as a child?
I was very shy as a child. And when I look back, there are times that I'm like embarrassed about how shy I was, because I just thought like I was doing something wrong or I was choosing to be shy. But even when I was really small, my mom says that I like just kind of kept to myself. And when they were doing even like fun things like dancing in the living room, I was kind of off to the side and like not really interested. And in some ways I wish I was different. Like I wish that I hadn't been that way, but I think I was born with it. Like there was something, and I think this is true of other people, but for me, especially growing up and going through like puberty and the teenage years, I had a really hard time connecting with people. And I always felt like the outsider, and like everybody else gets something that I don't get. Like what is missing here? So for me, it was that connection, like that strong desire for connection, but also feeling left out.
I'm sorry you had to experience that.
Thank you.
What was your first job?
My first job was working in a merchandise shop inside of a tennis club. I was in high school, so probably like 16 when I started. And the funny thing about that is that everyone in my family played tennis besides me, and I was working in a tennis shop. And it was fine. I enjoyed it. You got to talk to people and like keep the books and stuff. But there was a point where they hired me to teach toddlers tennis, which basically means play. And so we all have our little tennis rackets and these little sponge balls. And we were just like doing warm-up stuff, essentially. It wasn't a whole lot of real tennis, but I always thought it was so funny that I ended up being one of the instructors. I had no interest in tennis. I'd never actually picked up a racket to like play real tennis or even just like do it for fun. But that was my first job.
Give us 60 seconds on your career and life since college.
Since college. I graduated with a bachelor's in statistics, and so I thought that was the route that I wanted to go. But I'd never really had an internship or learned a whole lot about applying and like what it would look like to be an actuary or do something with risk, that kind of thing. I started meeting with people and realized that was not the route I wanted to go. And I had loved my time working with students. I tutored a lot in college. So then I was like, I think I'd really enjoy working in higher education, which was hard to find at first because usually you have a master's to work in higher education. But I did find a position at Texas A&M, which is how I ended up in College Station, as the tutor coordinator in the athletics department. And then from there, I have received a master's degree in higher education and then continued advising for a little while. I really enjoyed the experience of advising and helping students and showing them compassion. And I could just feel this palpable difference between run-of-the-mill advising, like here are the courses you need, and the connection that I was making with those students. So there was something really special to me about advising students in courses, in life, and helping them with some of their struggles and that kind of thing. I loved that vulnerability that I was able to experience with them. And I have a baby.
Indeed. How has that changed things for you, the transition to being a new mom? I knew you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but that things have changed somewhat in that respect. Tell our listeners about that.
Yes. So with being a mom, I've always wanted to be a mom. I babysat a lot growing up, and even from a young age, like an age that I would not trust a person with my child. And so I always enjoyed it. I thought it was amazing, and I loved kids. And I just imagined like, oh, what would it mean to see that love for a parent, like out of my own child? And I've always, continued to have that thought and wanted to get married and wanted to have a baby. And here we are, married, having a baby. And so I think knowing I wanted it, I didn't really think about the fallout. I had heard of things like postpartum depression, and I do sometimes, like I have struggles with anxiety. And so I figured that would maybe play a part in that. But I actually really didn't have a hard time with the newborn phase. Everyone talks about that as like the haze, the fog, it's so hard, but I expected that. I knew it was coming. 0 to 3 months, I was like, I can't do anything. I can't even expect to cook, clean. Like I know this is going to be all baby all the time. And then 4 months and on was when I really started to struggle. And I was surprised because things had gone so well in the part that people said was hard. And ever since then, so I had left my job because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom because my mom did it. And I thought that would be great to connect with my child and give them the same kind of atmosphere that my mom gave me. But I started struggling with insomnia, and my anxiety got much worse. And of course, then you feel guilt and shame about, am I doing a good job as a parent? Is all of the feeling I'm feeling affecting her? Is, what's going on here? And I love her, but also this process, this combination has been pretty tough for me. And so I've been working through that. And a lot of moms struggle with this, I think. And it's not really talked about a whole lot. Like postpartum depression seems like something that happens to other people, or it's a very rare, small amount, but I don't know that that's true. I think a lot of it is like us not really talking about it, or sometimes not even realizing that we have it and that we're struggling with it. That's the problem, I think, especially for women, is kind of like, I'm good, I can get through it. And I'm sure everybody has these struggles, or, it's really not that serious, when actually it kind of is. So that has been a struggle for me, and staying at home, especially during COVID. I mean, with everything going on with the pandemic and being stuck at home and just, entertaining a baby, I have had some trouble adjusting with that, and a lot of fear around the disease and it affecting people that I love coming into our home. So there's just a lot of anxiety there that I have been working through, and I've been getting help.
Let's talk about the other side of the coin. What has been your most unforgettable memory or experience as a new mom?
Yeah, so there's so much. I think and everybody would probably agree with this, when they laugh and smile, and even when you walk in the room and she just like held me as eyes for you, I think there's something special, this relationship connection between a baby and a mom, that's like, there's nothing else like it. And I think that is amazing. And specifically with like unforgettable memories, I have a few that are, you just kind of like accidentally fall into a really fun game. Like you do something different. Sometimes it's to distract, or, she's not in a good mood, so I'm trying to just like see what works. And one time she was in her high chair and I needed to like do stuff around the kitchen, and I just started bouncing around her high chair and going like, boo, every time I'd see her, or if like from the back would lean over the front. And she thought it was hilarious. And so I was able to get my stuff done and entertain our child. So it's been cool to find these new games that, especially when it's new and she loves it. Our child's a thrill seeker, so anything fun, crazy, she loves it. And so that makes it fun for us to find the next new game that's going to make her just like burst out laughing. It's adorable.
Yeah, and it's exactly like you said. All the best ones are sort of discovered by accident.
Yes, so true.
Talk about mom guilt a little bit. What has that been like for you? What have you learned from other moms? What would you want people to know about dealing with parental guilt?
Yeah, so for starters, I didn't realize, you have a baby, and then suddenly these thoughts and feelings start to come up about what you're doing wrong and how you feel guilty about that. And it's like, well, I didn't realize this came along with the package. Like, it's just kind of natural, I think, for it to start up and for you to start thinking like, my baby's not measuring up to other babies. And you hear a lot of comments from other people, well-meaning, friends and family saying, why aren't they crawling yet? Like, they normally should be crawling by now. And what are they eating? And those kinds of questions. And for me, I internalized those. I was insecure about it, and I've had some trouble dealing with like separation from that. And I've been working on that, and that's been helpful. But specifically, I know mom guilt is kind of like a thing people talk about. Like, I'm feeling guilty about not spending as much time with my kids and the things that I'm doing and that kind of thing. But really, I think what's going on for a lot of people, especially working moms, is shame. It's like real shame about, I'm a bad mom. So Brene Brown is such a good resource for this. And she explains it as, guilt is something about the moment. There's something I did that I wish I'd done differently. I feel guilty about it, and I want to move forward and do things differently next time. Shame says, you're a failure. You're a bad mom. You're the worst mom. You're not doing the right thing for your kids. You're messing them up, like all these terrible things. And sometimes we don't even realize we're having these thoughts. But in terms of recognizing I might be in that space as a mom, is naming it, first of all. So realizing, okay, I'm having a thought that says I'm a bad mom. And then focusing on what's realistic. Is that really true? Am I a terrible mom? Like, let's think about, how I provide for my children, and see things from a little bit more of a rational standpoint, and give yourself love and say, I just had a thought about shame, and I feel sorry that happened to me. Like that I'm berating myself so hard, like inserting some self-compassion there. That's really important. And then telling people. So I've found a lot of freedom, and so have my friends, in us discussing this. Even last night I was talking to another mom friend about this, and we've been able to figure out that we're both struggling in similar ways. And she said, I could cry knowing that you've shared these same struggles. Not that I'm happy that they happened to you, but that we can make this connection and we can understand each other in this deep way. And I said, please cry. If you feel the need to cry, definitely cry. Like, get those things out. And so I think it's a lot of work and there's a lot of steps there, but like, shame is a real thing. And if you're experiencing it in momhood, it probably came from somewhere else. And so exploring that is important. But another part is that we shame each other as moms. And that's why it's kind of scary to get into a new mom group, because everybody's got opinions about what you should be doing with diapers and feeding and all this new age baby-led weaning stuff. And so I think sometimes we get that shame from places that we should be gaining community and enjoying time together and supporting each other. Instead, we're getting shame and comments about like what should or shouldn't be happening. And that's another area that I think could be improved.
You mentioned self-love a minute ago. What do you do to show love to yourself?
Oh, that's a hard one, because it feels elusive sometimes, and it feels kind of silly to say that you love yourself, or to think about what does it mean to love myself. And it can show up in so many different ways. But for me, it's a couple of things. I think it's partly, what do you do during the day to make sure that you're taking care of yourself? So sometimes I just rush from one thing to another, and at the end of the day, I feel like I'm frazzled and don't even know where I am, or, I forgot to do a bunch of stuff, but I did other stuff I didn't need to do. And so some of it is just like going slower and taking care and taking time to relax. And for me, I've found that, and this isn't true for everyone, but for me, I found that being really nurturing with myself is helpful. It's kind of like, if there's something in you that seems like it's not been addressed, or say love from a parent, acceptance from a friend, a breakup that you've been through, and there's this fragile spot in you, to even put a hand on your chest and to say, I'm sorry you went through something so hard. I'm sorry that was so hurtful. I love you so much. Because it's true, like there's a part of us that needs that love. It's called sometimes the inner child. And I think people feel silly doing that, because it seems like, why would I talk to myself? But it can make a huge difference. I mean, I've been reading some books about it, and it's really hard to implement. And in the moment when you're really frazzled, the last thing you think of is like, I love you, self. I'm sorry that you're going through this hard experience, or sorry that you feel so all over the place right now. But for me, it always helps. Whenever I do it, I feel calmer, and I can tell that my inner self is like, thanks for giving me that extra, like, pat on the back. And sometimes I even feel a bodily sensation, like a shiver or something that's kind of like, hey, thanks for recognizing me. So there's a lot to it. I would definitely recommend resources. There's plenty of stuff out there about self-compassion, self-love, but yeah. And then one specific thing that I've been doing lately is called Qigong, and it's spelled Qigong, and it's a Chinese practice. And I've been doing yoga for a long time, but I find Qigong to be very soothing and relaxing, and even a short version helps me a lot with like calming my mind, because it's very slow and intentional movement. And I found it because of a book that talks about trauma, and how you're not meant to go back and relive the trauma to make it resolve. You're meant to reconnect with your body and show your body that it's safe. And that's what I've been doing to help with the insomnia that I've been struggling with, because it feels like a disconnection and a feeling of being unsafe in my body, not safe to fall asleep. So that's my other area of self-care, self-love.
How do you experience Qigong different from yoga? I'm more familiar with yoga as a practice, have done Qigong briefly with you, but why one versus the other?
Yes, so I've been doing yoga for years, and I always kind of saw yoga as a workout. So you and I really enjoyed hot yoga together, and you're the one who got me into yoga in the first place. And before that, I didn't think, anything of it. I know sometimes there's this kind of stigma against yoga for some people, and I just had never tried it. So for years I was doing yoga, and I was kind of doing it like the hard way, like everything has to be perfect and I've got to get in position and make sure my body's in the right space. And then lately, I stopped doing it for a while, and I've been reintroducing yoga at nighttime for helping relax me, and it did help. And then I read about, so it's Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about helping get through trauma by reconnecting with your body, not by revisiting the trauma, by showing your body it's safe. And then like the trauma is not as heavy and hard in your mind when you're learning how to show your body it's safe. And so he specifically recommended Qigong or yoga. And I was like, well, I already do yoga, but I want to see what Qigong is all about. And so I started it, and it was really hard at first to realize how, you're going up and doing things like yoga, but it's slow. It's like slowed down by 3, and you're going super, super slow and then down. But for me, it's been kind of what I feel afterward that's been the biggest difference. I feel so calm. Like I walk more slowly through the house. I do things more slowly, and I can tell that like those 3 layers of thoughts that are like chattering and loud all the time in my head quieted down, and they feel more separate for me. So that when I have a thought, I'm like, oh, that may or may not be true. And it's easier to separate from these things that feel like facts all the time. So for me, Qigong has been really powerful.
You've said a couple of times now that your take on dealing with trauma is not to reconnect with the trauma. And my experience has been a little bit different. I haven't experienced trauma the way that some people have. The worst specific trauma of my life was probably my parents' divorce. But I've had difficulties with other things. Graduating from college, I think, is an underrated difficult experience. Moving to LA was a tough one for me, and I've had rough breakups but I don't know if those really counted as trauma necessarily. But for all of those things, getting in direct touch with that has been an important part of the grieving process. It seems like you've had a somewhat different experience. Can you explain?
So for me, what I try to do is plop myself down on the couch, take a few deep breaths, and then kind of see where I'm at with the situation. Like for me, sleep is the big one. Like, am I going to sleep tonight? I have a big fear about, can I really relax into sleep? And so I'll sit down and I'll just try to like be with the thoughts and be okay with the fear, and say, I don't have to fear the fear, if that makes any sense. And sometimes that works for me, but as things got worse and harder, it seemed defeating and like I couldn't get there. And there have been times where I've exposed myself to those things that, have been hard, and my body still feels too fragile to touch those things. And so the point of Qigong and what van der Kolk is addressing is we start with finding safety in the body. And as you do that, as your body becomes safe and more relaxed, and you can tell that you're kind of finding your footing again, he says you can at that point look back and look at the trauma and see it as a little bit separate from you. It's a little farther away. So it's basically once you've gotten to that more relaxed state, so don't like expose yourself and then get yourself back in the situation where you're visualizing, expecting it to happen to you again. It's more like once you're relaxed, once you've gotten to that space, you can write about it, look at it, and definitively say, that was my past, and now this is the present. That thing that happened to me is not going to happen again. It's not happening to me right now. I am safe and I'm loved. And that can help with processing the traumatic experience in a way that doesn't feel like you're reliving it. It's kind of like it happened to someone else, or it's just like a few steps away. So you're viewing it, but you're not experiencing it. So that's been kind of the takeaway for me. And I agree. I have not been through anything that to me would qualify, or even to a therapist would qualify as trauma. But there are things that happen to us that are really difficult. Like you said, breakups and college. And for me, it's been anxiety, panic attacks, sleep, especially when it seems like there's no reason for me to be panicking. I'm totally fine. I'm safe. Everything is great. I have a great life. And so then you feel even more guilty and you're piling on that shame. And so I think, honestly, everyone can benefit from some of these body exercises, reconnecting with the body, because our lives are so disconnected. You know, we're at work all day, we're busy. And so we're in our heads all day long, but we're not really paying attention to our body sensations. And that mind-body connection is so important just for living and connecting with ourselves and feeling emotions and that kind of thing. I have learned a lot from personal healing. So I'm always looking for answers and things that can help me to feel better. And I also did begin a counseling graduate program that I did not finish because we had a baby. And that gave me a lot of resources to understand myself even better, at the very least. And I know that there's so much more out there, and I'm not a clinician. The things I'm sharing are things that are what I've learned and what has helped me. And I would encourage people, if you're interested in this, if any of this resonates with you, to look up those resources yourself and to find what works for you. And I definitely validate and recognize that everyone's experience with dealing with trauma and working through anything that's been a challenge in your life, you find what works for you. You don't just, believe what I'm saying. And I've used a few different books that some of it overlaps and some of it's a little bit different. And I just have to kind of create my own, like bring it all in together and decide, ask myself what works for me. What do I need right now? And even that is a form of self-love. In this moment, when I'm freaking out, I'm having so much anxiety, what can I do, Madysen, to help you? What do you need right now to help you just feel supported and feel loved? So it's a very personal process, but there are a lot of resources out there to help you. And I think that's kind of the bottom line, but I am not the clinician. That's kind of what the point of this is.
Just briefly for the listeners, so recap those resources for us for the personal stuff you mentioned.
So for the trauma, and I think sometimes we don't even realize that there are things that can be traumatic that don't fit with the typical trauma thing. So if you're having a hard time dealing with something, or it feels like you're disconnected from your body, Bessel van der Kolk is a very helpful resource. His book is called The Body Keeps the Score. And it basically talks about how when you have a traumatic experience, it lodges itself in your body. And now doing calming practices to help show your body you're safe is the best way. You don't have to work out really hard to get those things out of you. And then, as we talked about, you can address that trauma kind of separately. And the book is very scientific and dense. So if you're looking for just some tips, he's got a lot of podcasts as well.
Great.
Yes. And then the other one, I mentioned Brené Brown for shame and mom guilt. The specific book that I think is most relevant for that mom shaming is The Gifts of Imperfection. And she has many other books, but that's the one right now that seems most relevant to that conversation.
Great. Thank you. Let's shift gears and start by talking a little bit about higher education. You've expressed some pretty forward-thinking opinions, specifically about the timing of higher education. Tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Yes. So since I've worked in advising both at Texas A&M, so a 4-year institution, and then at Blinn College, which is the community college in town, I've just noticed a lot of things about different levels of motivation and plans and what students are even doing on campus. And I think that because of this societal and sometimes parental pressure to go to college, there are a lot of people who end up in a spot where they're not motivated, they're not doing well, they have no 5-year, 10-year plan, and now they're wasting money and they're receiving poor grades, which don't just disappear when they do receive motivation somehow or find that. And so I based on especially working at Blinn, my recommendation, my idea is that we become more comfortable with graduating high school and going into some kind of job where you can learn more about what you're looking for, what you want, and spend some time self-reflecting and figuring out, what do I want to do? Interviewing and asking people in different fields. Like, if you're thinking about being a nurse, what does it mean to be a nurse? What does it mean to get through that schooling process? And what does the job look like? And that way you're not like, you're working and you're not spending time and resources on school that you're not really even motivated to do. And then I think the other piece is, once you graduate from your undergraduate, I think for me especially, you're always thinking of like the next step. So like, now I want to get my master's. That's kind of the new thing right now, is that a lot of people are going on to advanced degrees. And sometimes I think students rush into that as well. And so I think the value of work experience is important there, where you, again, figure out what you want, what works for you. It took me a few years to even figure out what kind of job I wanted, what lifestyle I wanted. And so taking that time and recognizing that school is always going to be there, and it can be there when you're ready. So it is good to think about that and to decide, this is the advanced degree I want to go for, but take your time. Basically, there's no wrong time. There's no wrong age to go back to school.
Right. We like structure. We like stability as humans, and we kind of put ourselves on the hamster wheel to some degree.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost like an addiction to school for some people. For the people who are feeling motivated, this is me. I feel in my element when I am doing schoolwork. It makes sense. It's what I've always done. And so there's kind of this draw to the familiar, the comfortable, in knowing performance and knowing what you need to do, what each semester is going to be like. And work is not like that. Being in the workforce, like, everything is so different. It's about interpersonal relationships, having a boss, and performance just looks a lot different. And you don't get a grade for how you're doing. Sometimes you feel underappreciated for things. And so I think sometimes just being in the workforce is tougher than you think, especially when you first graduate college. That's a huge transition.
Given that you're not working in higher ed at this point, but you do have an advanced degree in it, what was the most impactful thing you took away from that program?
Yes. So I think it was all very valuable, especially with learning about relationships and advising. But I took a diversity in higher education class, and I think that changed my life, like changed the way my brain thinks about diversity, and especially with everything going on right now and what has been going on, I could just become a lot more aware of myself and the reality of the situation for others. So in that particular class, like, we read a book on white privilege, and I was very angry at first because it was pretty direct, and I think it was written by a white person. And so, but it was saying basically, like, you're benefiting from all these systems, and you're not understanding that all these people there are people that are not benefiting, and you are part of the problem, not necessarily to like take blame or to just feel bad about yourself, but it was making me aware of white privilege. And so at the beginning, I was like in denial. By the end of the book, I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is real. And I didn't even know about it. I didn't know it was a problem. And so that just shows how blind we can be to it without having that educational component. But also just learning since then, but I think anything I've learned since then has been kind of in the framework of that class. So because I had that as my baseline, now when I talk to people, and I have talked to a couple people of color about what to say and how to help and how to support. And the biggest things I've learned have been like just saying, I see you and I see that you're having a struggle that's different from mine, and that's really hard. And I want to support you. And how are you? How are you doing? These kinds of questions seem to be helpful, but also everyone's an individual. And so everyone's going to respond to you differently. I think all of that has been helpful. And then one more thing related to that is I talked with one of our neighbors, who said that someone was asking him, how do I handle it? How do I handle this race conversation and supporting my people and my people of color? And he said, you start small, and it's not, big change. I have to go and do something. It's, what does your workplace look like? Who are you hiring? What does the diversity look like in your office? Are you hiring capable people of color? And then if you do have people of color who are working for you, starting with them, having a meeting with them that says, are we supporting you in the way that you need? Are you feeling heard? Are you a part of the conversation? Are you part of the process? Do you feel like you are? And even that conversation opens things up and shows respect and understanding. So there's so many ways that we can make small progress and small changes that will kind of domino effect, make bigger changes. So I think people thinking, oh, there's nothing I can do. It's not true. You can find somebody out there to even smile at and say hello and basically say, I see you as a person, which is amazing.
You mentioned you had a big negative reaction to this at first. Has there been anything else in your working life that was a burden to you at first that you've now come to appreciate, or that you feel has changed your world in some way?
Yes. So I think for me, as I mentioned earlier, grew up really shy. And as I got through college, I gained confidence. And I think I learned in some ways how to compensate. Like I kind of watched what other people were doing, and I was able to show confidence even if I felt nervous. And in some ways, I think that was a good thing. And in some ways, I think it has harmed me a little bit because I'm not being authentic. Sometimes I'm like frazzled and nervous, but I project as confident, and people are like, wow, you did such a great job. And I'm over here like internally freaking out. And I want to kind of merge the two somehow. And when I first started working, I was brought in as the tutor coordinator to make a lot of changes in the tutoring program, which I was now in charge of. But as soon as I got there, it was basically like, no, don't do that. We basically aren't ready for change. Nothing's going to change. And basically just keep doing what we were already doing. And that was really hard to process. And it was just so frustrating having to navigate this new system and learning. I mean, it was a big staff. There were about 25 of us, and learning that they just had a way of doing things, and I was just coming in. So at first it was really frustrating to feel like I wasn't able to come in and do the job that I was told I was going to be able to do. But then as time went on, and as I look back, I learned how to make those interpersonal relationships with people and to recognize change happens when trust is there and when understanding is there. And when I understand where they're coming from, they see me as someone who's safe and not trying to just come in and shake things up and like destroy everything that they had planned that was kind of working, kind of not for them. They were comfortable enough in it. And so I think that experience really helped me to grow in sitting back, being patient, and waiting for the connections to happen. And as I did that, it helped me to learn other people need to be a part of the conversation. If I'm going to come in and change a program that affects everyone in this office, even though I'm in charge of it, I get to make a space for it to be a conversation and for other people to have ideas and to say, what if we did this? And now change is happening and I'm okay with it. And I didn't bring it to the table. Like that was so perfect to see it become a team effort where everybody was on the same page and supportive rather than me showing up and saying, all right, this is how it's going to be. So that I learned a lot from that. And I can still apply that to things I do now. I started a mom group for moms with babies, and we're talking about ideas for things that we're going to do. And I am always asking them, like, I want you guys to bring suggestions to the table. I have a few ideas. Which one of these do you think is the best thing for us? Where should we start? And I'm asking individual members where they think we should go. And I know that helps a lot with not feeling like I'm coming in saying I'm in charge of this thing, because I'm a new mom too. It's not like I'm the leader. I've got 4 kids and I've got it all figured out or whatever. It's just a meeting of the minds and a way to support each other through that. So I learned a lot from that, even though when I first got there, it was intensely frustrating.
What is the thought process that you feel like leads to the post-collegiate continuation of this treadmill effect, the hamster wheel effect?
Something that I have noticed with myself and other people my age and people just graduating from college is this sense of what now? What's next? It's, you graduate college and the assumption is you're going to go off and work. But then to me, it was like this big abyss of like work forever until I die or retire or whatever. Like just having that hamster wheel, having that constant school is next. And then now opening up into the abyss of work. For some, I think they see exciting possibilities, the idea of climbing the ladder and that kind of thing. But for me and for a lot of other people I've talked to, it's more like, oh my gosh, like who am I and what do I want to be? And it's more than just what job am I going to get, but it's actually kind of an existential crisis of there's so much that I don't know, and there's so much I don't know about myself. And a lot of times for people like getting in their first job or having trouble finding it, they realize that they do have problems with anxiety or unprocessed emotions and that kind of thing. And so I think what would really help is having more of a mental health psychology kind of lesson for seniors in college that talks about this, that says, I know you're asking yourself, what now? What do I do next? And there's going to be some emotional stuff to process with that. And even just recognizing, telling them, you've been on the hamster wheel your whole life. You're about to come off it. Like that's a transition, and that's a big transition. And I think that awareness in and of itself is important. And then moving forward, what are the kinds of strategies and skills that you can take with you so you can be working on those while you're in your next job, recognizing that it's not just about the job. There's so much personal growth that happens as well. And taking care of your mental health, how important that is. I didn't realize that. And for me, the first few years of working full time, I was very lonely. I had a hard time transitioning, from graduating college, but then moving to a college town. But now I'm a young professional, and it's not cool to go to the bars anymore and hang out with college students because I'm like at the next step, and it's just a weird dynamic.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. So I really struggle with loneliness and finding my pack, finding a group of people. And even when you do, say you're in a big city, it's hard to connect with individuals and to really be vulnerable and honest with people about like, I'm really struggling here. I think loneliness is a big category for people in that respect. So I found a book it's for people who are just graduating college, and she mentions college students a lot, but it's actually been really helpful for me, even as a new mom, kind of past the college stage. So I would say it's good for almost any age group because it's so focused on things like loneliness and unprocessed emotions and finding your inner self and connecting with your body and that kind of thing. So that, I think, is a recommendation for pretty much anyone who might think there's something missing here. I'm constantly striving, but I don't know what it's for, who I am. So that book is called What Now? Meditation for Your 20s and Beyond by Yael Shai. Her name is spelled Y-A-E-L and then Shai. For me, it's the only book I've really found that addresses what it means to be in that space of like the 20, 30 range. And that seems like kind of the truth everywhere. What do we do with young professionals? Just not recognizing it's a serious need. It's an urgent, like we need to figure out how to transition from college into working world, more than just soft skills in the workplace, but who I am as a person. I think a lot of people are like existentially anxious, and maybe don't even realize it.
Social media management is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. You got unexpectedly looped in with it. Tell us that story.
Yeah. So I love this because social media is not my thing. I recognize it as something that is not healthy for me to compare and to be on. And so I really don't spend a whole lot of time on social media personally, but I've now been presented with 2 job opportunities recently when I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but then realized I'm not sure if I can do this. Like, I need something for my brain to do. And then, of course, like, these 2 opportunities fall into my lap, which is amazing. But I definitely have learned that I may not like social media personally, but I know how to operate it in terms of reaching people and using that marketing for helping people find the product and be excited about the product. And that surprised me. I did not know that I had that skill. So in college, did a marketing class, and I thought, this is not me. I don't like the idea of like ads and trying to sell people on things and trying to like trick people into buying a product. And so I didn't like that course, and I didn't think that's where I was going to go. And so that's another cool part of this story, is that it's a surprise that I have this skill inside me that I was thinking, that's not really my thing. So I started with Basecamp Farms recently. I'm working part-time there, and it's kind of like some work at the farm, some work from home, and I've been really enjoying it. I was brought in to keep things organized and do emails and that kind of thing, but it's turned into so much more already. I've only been there for 6 weeks maybe, and I've been doing an overhaul of the website, and that relates back to a job I've done in the past, which has been cool to see how the website updating has been really important for me, and I thrive on that. So that's kind of part of this, is the branding and the marketing and layouts, and seeing like, this doesn't look right, these pictures are too big, like this is what people are looking for. So I'm looking at this website that she's looked at a bunch of times, but I'm seeing it from the consumer perspective. And so I'm saying, this doesn't work, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be changed. And so really enjoyed the website updating there. And then with the marketing side of it, I, again, surprised myself. Jordan Monroe, who runs the farm, she said that we were selling the last of the sunflowers and we weren't going to have them for another month. And I said, let's utilize that. Like, let's send an email out today that says sunflower sellout. Like, we are going to be completely out of sunflowers for a whole month. This is your last chance to get them. And she was like, oh, what a good idea. And so it's just funny that from someone who's not normally like this, I saw an opportunity and I was like, let's do this. And then we sold out within days. I mean, it was fantastic. And then with social media, another opportunity presented itself for the Fit for Mom community, where moms get together and do workouts and bring their kids along. And there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. And as I met with the coordinator for that, I was just like running off with ideas. What if we did shorter classes for those moms whose kids like are getting a little crazy in the stroller? And what if we're posting things about like wellness and health and showing we're more than just the fitness community? Like, I had all these ideas for posting and marketing in ways that were just a little different. So I think it's just bringing in that different perspective. And for me, it was, oh, I'm really good at this thing, that if somebody had asked me, are you interested in social media? I would have said, no, that is not my thing at all. I do not do social media. But now that I'm in this position and I'm talking to people, I'm so excited about the idea of spreading a message. And it's not just ads. It's not just cold calling. To me, I feel this purpose because it's getting a message out, getting people connected. That's so important to me. It goes back to like the mom group that I created. I want people to find connection in their community. Being isolated, especially during this time, is so unhelpful. And we always think, there's nobody out there like me. There's nobody out there that I can connect with. And doing these pushes for social media to say, you belong here. This is about you. And I want you to see this and to know you are welcome here. That's so important to me. So it's like this deep desire for me to help people make connections and find community and find these things that's I think, driving me to be so excited about it and to do it so well.
And this relates to the fact that I think we're continuing to do young people a disservice by asking them to specialize too early, by asking them to choose a career path too early. As Kyle's favorite book, Range, by David Epstein, mentions over and over again. But all right, that's I love that answer. Let's move to rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
I have plenty, but I definitely didn't see failures as a good thing until recently. But my most valuable failure, I think, is when I was working and advising. I was in charge of writing offer letters, and it was down to the wire. We had to do it all so quickly. We were under this crazy deadline, and I kind of just like rushed through it, but thought, I'm doing this well. And I would read through it to edit. I would read through it really fast, and then I would send it off to my boss, and then she would catch all these errors. And then it's like, you can't make these mistakes. Like, these are important. These are about money, like scholarships and offers to be accepted into the university. And so I learned that there are times to be meticulous and there are times to see the bigger picture. And in that way, I needed to go word by word, line by line. And instead I was just doing the quick run through. And so that was something that taught me it's like all in the details when you're doing something that important. And I think hearing from my boss, basically, you messed this up and you need to go back and fix it, or putting the burden on her to fix it, that's a big lesson. That's like, I do not want to do that again.
Yeah. What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
My family would laugh at this because they know I'm an introvert, but I think a lot of my friends and people that I know here in town think I'm more extroverted and love to be around people and get my energy there. But I am so much happier at home, and I get my energy from being alone. I just know how important it is to connect with people, and I love connecting with people, but it takes more out of me than it does give me that energy. So I kind of have to find that balance of being alone, being by myself, and spending time with myself. But also I really enjoy, like I said earlier, connections and helping people get connected.
If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Okay, so I would say Gary John Bishop. And if anyone hasn't heard of him, be prepared when you look him up for the vulgar titles of his books. They are very direct, and that's what I love about it. And so I want him to be my mentor for the day. I know it's kind of an unconventional answer because he talks a lot about our thoughts, and we are not our thoughts. And basically, you can get yourself out of this situation no matter what. So basically, no excuses. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the 7 assertions that you're going to have, and you have to do them constantly. So I think it's funny because when you look up the books, you'll see what I'm talking about, that he is somebody who's very direct, and he's Scottish. So I do his Audible audiobook, and I just love listening to him. And he's like, you don't have to live this way anymore. Like, it's perfect. So I think having him for a day would be so amazing, to just have him look at my thoughts and be like, girl, let's do this.
What is the most important advice you would give to yourself exactly 5 years ago?
Yes, I still give myself this advice today, but definitely to not rush through things. Something that I do with new jobs is I try to take it all in at once, and then I get stressed and overwhelmed thinking, how am I ever going to do this job? There's so much to learn, especially at Blinn. There were so many little nuances, and you had to do stuff with transfers. You had to know so much stuff about different institutions, and I would tell myself, relax, it's going to work out. You are going to learn it eventually, and it's better for you to take it slow and piece by piece than to try to learn it all today. And basically that perfectionism, the hamster wheel thing was kind of going on there, where I was taking it all in and trying to be ready before I really needed to be ready.
What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
So I'm not sure if this is exactly where this question is meant to go, but for me, I'm learning very recently that it's better to accept and even to talk about our mortality because it's there. And a lot of times we kind of pretend like it isn't, and we get together as friends and family and we hang out and we kind of act like we have all the time in the world. We have forever to keep doing this. And sometimes that makes things less special. And I think if we thought more and talked more about the fact that none of us are promised tomorrow, somebody might not wake up tomorrow that's really special to you, and it could be you. So like, what does that mean for the way that we live our lives? And I think that like intense avoidance of our mortality, that we're going to die one day, is what keeps us from living a meaningful life, because we're hiding from the inevitable. And so I know a lot of people, I never talk to really anybody about this, but some of the books I've been reading focus on them a lot. Gary John Bishop talks about it a lot. Like he's like, you will die. Like you are going to die. And that's intense, but...
Is that one of the titles of his books? You Will Die by Gary John Bishop.
You are going to die.
Published immediately after Go F Yourself.
Oh, shoot. So, yeah, I mean, it's not meant to like bring you down and to make you depressed. It's meant to make you think, wow, there's so much vitality in life here. I want to soak it all in while I can, instead of just like meandering through life as a body and not recognizing the beauty of the person you're in front of, your children, like nature, that kind of thing. Like just being able to be here and know that your time here is limited. And it's not even just, I might live till I'm 100 or 80. Like you might not live as long as you would hope for, with so many expectations.
We're all going to die, except Betty White. What is your fondest memory of Texas A&M?
Yes, so I worked there. I had a lot of good memories, but the best one was definitely when I had an intern and she worked with me for a while and we got very close, and I was able to volunteer at the same time that she was getting her ring. And so I got to be the person behind the table who got to give her her Aggie ring. And it was so cool to have that experience. Yeah, just amazing. Her name is Kaylee.
We love you, Kaylee. Anyone you would like to send good bull?
Yes. Well, first of all, I have like 100 people I'd like to send good bull because I have such a good support system. But the particular person I'd like to recognize right now is Greg Wise. He is a friend that I met at Blinn, and he's been a part of our home group, and he is so special to me. And I wanted to just thank him and talk about how great he has been as a support for me as I've talked about some of the things I'm struggling with and the ways, especially with sleep and things I'm dealing with during the day, guilt, that kind of thing. He was the first person, he recommended Vanderkolk to me because he said sometimes sitting meditation is not enough to get you through some of the stuff you're dealing with. And so he gave me a lot of tips on things they do. He's in theater, and so like practices they do for acting and ways that they kind of get out of their own heads so that they can take on being a character. And a lot of those tips and things that they do for that related to me, and I could use them to help myself. And it did help a lot. So it was really great to have such a good resource and have him give me all of those ideas and be able to use them. He's just such a good listener. He's so mindful and aware when we're together. And I just love that about him. And I'm so grateful to him.
Good bull. Greg, we love you too. Madysen, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
For our Mastercast top 3 takeaways, I first wanted to talk about what Maddie said about the first 3 months not being as hard as she expected, and then the following months of motherhood being even harder than she expected, which struck me for a lot of reasons. One, the motherhood aspect, but 2, even just the importance of expectations. And I think Maddie, I'd heard that a couple of weeks ago from Maddie about her being prepared for the hardness of the first 3 months. And then it really surprising her that there wasn't some great relief after those first 3 months, that it was different, but still really challenging and challenging for different reasons. That maybe she didn't feel as equipped to handle. And I think a tangible change that I can make as a result of that is in seeing my sister have 4 children, especially in being, we have such a close relationship and are so open about things, that I saw the struggle and the challenge of those first 3 months. And so a lot of times I will, really be empathetic to moms for those first 3 months, or even say like, hey, I know those first 3 months are going to be challenging. Here's what I can do to help. Like, call me anytime when you go on a walk with the baby, call me, or just these things, or don't ever call me because you're so busy. I get it. Like, I try to really make tangible efforts in those first 3 months. And I think that probably I can shift that for 2 reasons. One, because it does continually emphasize this idea that the first 3 months are hard. And then I know motherhood is a joy, but it also is challenging. It doesn't acknowledge the continued challenge that can come with motherhood. And so I think that was really helpful for me to think about shifting the way that I talk to or think about talking to new or expecting mothers.
I don't spend a whole lot of time talking to new or expecting mothers, but I do think that I will say that Maddie has done a great job imparting a lot of the same wisdom that she shared with us today to her local community of new and expecting mothers, and getting modern civilization, modern society to a place where we can acknowledge the darker parts of whatever phase of life we might be in, I think is kind of one of the frontiers of modern psychology and sort of our collective consciousness as a nation, but just as a human species, is to say, yeah, it's great to be excited about graduating from college, and it is scary.
Adulting is hard.
Yeah. And that phrase, adulting is hard, no one ever sits you down to tell you just how hard it is. And my dad and I had at least a dozen conversations that carried the general theme, it's just hard getting started in life. And every phase of life you could apply to this in some way. And by the way, all of that is why we stay on the hamster wheel, is because it's nice just to have some stability at any particular step along the way. And it's the same reason why you just don't see a whole lot of people taking a gap year that could be so valuable, because a gap year is scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's really scary. And just sort of going on, like, college is well ordained. It's a good investment for most people, and continuing your education in some form or fashion is really smart for basically everyone. But exactly how and when you do that is something that I think we should give a lot more deliberate thought to. And a lot of us don't do it. And I get that, because it's just frightening.
I like what you said about the hamster wheel too, because I think it applies to so many aspects of our life. Like,
yeah,
education for sure. And Maddie did a great job of talking about that on the show. But, even what we're talking about here with motherhood, there's something about the hamster wheel that is somewhat comfortable that, like, if I just keep going, I don't have to deal with this thing I'm feeling, or I don't have to deal with this concern I have. I just don't have to deal, right? I just can keep running on the hamster wheel and move things forward and just stay busy, and things will all be okay. And we don't oftentimes stop to spend the time to reflect, to do the work and get off the hamster wheel. Or, in work too. It's so, we've talked about this on the show so many times. I think your brother, even David, talked about it with, like, you're constantly trying to move up. Oftentimes people are constantly trying to move up in an organization. You get on that hamster wheel, and then you get to a point where it's like, oh, now I have to learn how to lead people. I got to get off the hamster wheel and really do the work to figure out how to lead people. It's a tough transition jumping off the hamster wheel, but it's an important one to do to help us be more thoughtful, like Maddie.
And it connects to another aspect of the show, because we are doing our best not to put Brielle on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
In terms of, why isn't she crawling yet? Because she's not ready. She'll be ready when she's ready. We're giving her little scaffolding exercises, and that's all great. And it will happen when it's time.
Yeah.
And she's a healthy kid, and she's a happy kid, and she's an amazing sleeper. and she enjoys being on her own in her crib sometimes. Sometimes she'll wake up and we know she's awake, but she's not making any noise. And, eventually we go in and get her, especially if she starts fussing. But there's so many things that she does so well. And just because she's not crawling yet, we're not losing sleep over it. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to let anybody else make us lose sleep over it.
I think that's so wise. I have a friend who her children were really late in potty training. And we would always say, like, there's no healthy 7-year-olds that wear a diaper. Like, your kid's going to figure it out. Just give them a minute. It's okay. And she, especially, she has 4 kids now. And so, the first one, it was like, oh my gosh. And then the second one, it was, and by the third one, she was like, I'm just not good at potty training. And it's not something I really want to do, deal with. And so they're just going to be a little bit later than most kids, but they figured it out at a perfectly normal age. Right. And so, I don't know, it's easy to get so hung up on those things. And it's interesting that it is very reflective of our own hamster wheel. It just seems, I think the stakes for parents feel different when it's their own child, because you just want things to be easy and perfect for them. Even if you're able to stop and go, no, I know life's not going to be easy and perfect for them, and it's going to help them learn and grow. When it's not easy and perfect for them, you still kind of want it to be easy and perfect for them. So yeah, it's a lot of the same things we put on ourselves. Like, am I good enough? Am I normal? Am I progressing at the same pace? But it's something that's so internal. And when I think you see it in a child, it feels more urgent or intense, and it's hard to back off on that.
It is. But it's so important to give deliberate thought to that on behalf of your child, because you can help take your own incremental step toward getting that disease out of our society.
Yeah, the hamster wheel disease. I like that. HWD. We'll call it HWD, hamster wheel disease.
Hamster wheel disease.
Ben. Yeah, we'll make sure it's in like all the psychology books.
I think hamster wheel disease might be good for the title.
I like that. But I think the other thing that's really important, I talk to MBA students about this a lot, that I hear, and I'll back it up to even back to parenthood, but I talk to MBA students a lot about how the way that you practice in the MBA program is the way that you'll perform in life. And specifically, I will hear students say things like, well, for the next 18 months, I'm just not going to have a personal life. I'm just going to only study and not worry about those other things in life. Like my family, I'll be a family person when the 18 months are over. I'll work out when the 18 months are over. I'll get off the hamster wheel when these 18 months are over. And I think I speak from my own personal experiences. When you make those compromises and you don't practice setting those boundaries, it's just easier to keep making them. And so those same students who say at the end of the 18 months, I'll start having more balance, they end up doing that for the first 2 years of their career, and then the next 2, and then the next 2. And well, when after this promotion, I'll slow down. After this, I'll slow down. And it doesn't happen. And I look back at even the children, and I think that you and Maddie are wise. I could end the sentence there. I think you and Maddie are wise to not fall into the trap of the hamster wheel when it's just crawling, because if you don't practice it when it's crawling, you won't practice it when it's elite sports. Yeah, or work. But even for the child, like, it just gets harder to get off the hamster wheel as that child starts to grow. And then it's harder, and we see this in higher education now, the high rates of anxiety that children experience because they've been overscheduled their whole lives, right? They've been on that hamster wheel their whole lives in a way that, frankly, we might have been, but not in the same way. We were not in the same way on the hamster wheel. We were busy, I know, and we were overscheduled. And we talked about it on Janet Parrish's show. I think she called it the academic arms race or something like that. We
arms race is the perfect phrase.
Yeah, we keep doing it. And I don't know exactly where it stops, but I know it's not in 18 months or in 2 years. It can't be that. It's got to be a today thing.
Yeah, yes. And that's exactly it. Here's where it has to start. You don't have to, and by the way, for everyone listening, stop making New Year's resolutions. New Year's resolutions are not, if you find that it actually helps you and that you keep your New Year's resolutions, great. I'm not talking to you. But for all the rest of us who make these New Year's resolutions and then do not keep them, stop. Instead, think today, what is the change that I want to see in my life? And you don't have to make the change today, but today you should start thinking about how you could make the change in a way that's actually implementable. And it's in the small things. And again, this relates back to what Maddie said about diversity and taking the incremental step. It's in the small things. What's the first small thing that you could implement in order to start walking along the road toward the change that you want, whether it's in your own life or in the way that you relate to others? And it's not winning the arms race, it's refusing to play. But you do that piece by piece. And if you, the listener, as a person have been plugged into this concept of the arms race your whole life, separating from that will be a process. It will not happen overnight. And so think, okay, what is the first most natural and not necessarily easy, but the step that you can implement in a straightforward way? Does that make sense?
It really does. I think a few things about that in response. One, transitioning to our second takeaway, Maddie talked a lot about guilt versus shame and Brene Brown's conversations on that and how, and what struck me about that was that guilt, not taken to an extreme, can really say, Maddie explained it as like, I made a mistake. I don't like that. I feel bad about that. How can I change it? Versus shame being kind of stuck in that, right? And I think that being in that place of not shame, but of I have something I need to change and being willing to change it is a really powerful place to be if we can engage in some of the positive self-talk that Maddie talked about of not saying, oh, I'm such an idiot. Or, for me, it's working too much. And this weekend, my sister and I were together working on the business and we blew up Reddit a little bit this weekend is what happened. And it took over about 10 hours of our weekend. It was like 8 hours straight that we were responding to questions on Reddit. And it was so fun. But my sister was multiple times, she was like, you are insane. I mean, I sat there for 8 hours straight and just cranked it out and responded and responded and responded. And she was like, and she kept taking breaks. She was like, I'm watching a movie. I'm going to go eat. I'm going to go. Like, I'm not doing this. Like, just shut it down. And I would say, okay, I'm going to respond to one more. And I would just keep going. And, in some ways she was like, you're a machine. And that makes it worse because I'm like, yep, I'm really good at this. Like, let's keep going. But yeah, bended arm muscles. But in other ways, it was really enlightening to watch the difference between her. She accomplished a lot that day, but she was like, I'm not going to do what you're doing. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go all day and be manic about it. She's like, I'm going to walk away from it for a minute and try to be more of a sane person. And it was, a good reminder to me that, and I think what you said just a minute ago, it was a good reminder of me that I need to acknowledge the changes or the outcomes that I want to be different than what they are now. And I need to work on the small steps to get there. And for me, it's going to have to be tangible things that become habits. Like, I can't say I would like to stop working in a manic machine way because that's not going to work. But what could work is I'm going to set an alarm for 1 hour and I'm going to do this really focused for 1 hour. And then I am going to take a break. And that's been helpful for me in the past. It's just an easy habit to drop for me too. So I thought that was really insightful about what Maddie said of we can change our behavior. We have to get out of shame and we have to start working on thinking, what is the small incremental change that we can make?
In terms of specifically what you were just talking about, have you read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg?
I have not.
It's a really, really good book.
Okay.
And it's about breaking certain habits and building others.
I've heard you talk about it before.
Yeah, really good read. There's another one that's kind of plays with the same concepts, and I prefer The Power of Habit probably because I got to that one first. Mm-hmm. But Atomic Habits by James Clear is also really good. And I recommend them both.
Thanks.
The other thing to keep in mind is that neither it sounds like your reaction to all of that was maybe I don't necessarily want to do it this way. And that's okay. And if you came off the end of that day and you were energized and felt like I could do this for 5 more hours, then that's great.
Yeah.
Then that potentially great. And the only thing I think that for our listeners, the only thing that I would say to be mindful of is sometimes the short term, your short term reaction to something like that is different than your long term reaction to something like that.
That's the issue, is that I can do that for 3 days and then feel completely drained. And I would be better if I worked on, and my lovely counselor talks about how balance is not just you get in this one state of balance and you stay there. It literally is balancing, that you're going back and forth and you give things certain attention, greater attention at one point and less at another point. And it really is, it might look extreme in any one small increment, but over the course of a period of time, a day, a week, whatever it is, there's balance there. So I think that what you just said is really important, that there is a short-term almost high for me of that, and there's a long-term cost to it. And not just in, I feel drained, but, I'm not as present when I'm in that manic state of focused on working, or I'm not as engaged with Ryan, or I'm not as, 2 days later, I'm drained and not as good as I would be otherwise. So I think, the other thing I would say is, the problem is that I know I need to make a change, and I keep saying I need to make a change, and I'm not really making the change, right? And so I think what you said is true too. The reward is pretty significant for me, and so it's hard to remember the costs.
Yeah. One thing that's a challenge for me is it varies. Like it fluctuates a fair bit. And some days I need kind of a fair bit of decompression time. And some days I need 10 minutes to read at the end of the night, and I'm good. Mm-hmm. And so just being aware of that and really listening to my, not exactly body clock, but my internal metronome, so to speak, is really important. Another thing, this is an area where I think male privilege is particularly strong, because if you were to ask me, how much time per week do I spend feeling fear, guilt, or shame? 5 minutes a week. And I'm talking about guilt of like a mild variety, like, I said that in a way that I didn't really mean, and I'm sorry. I could have done a better job with that. It's sort of guilt, like that's like diet guilt. And men, for the most part, ironically, other than in conversations about privilege, I think the conversation has become much more effective over the past few years, because I think in the early days, white privilege, male privilege, both were kind of used as taunts. And now the conversation is, I think, not where it needs to be, but moving in the direction that it needs to be. And other than that, men are just not told, hey, you need to feel bad about this if you're not doing it the right way, so to speak. And I think women just are hit much, much harder with, are you checking this box? Are you checking that box? Are you checking the other box? And yeah, I feel for all the women out there. And my hope is that in our lifetimes, that all of us can be released from having to live your life according to someone else's script.
I spend roughly 5 minutes not feeling guilt or shame a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thanks, Ben. For our final takeaway, Maddie said this better than I'll say it, but she talked about how important it is to soak in life, and how if we don't, not that we need to sit and reflect on the fact that we're going to die all the time, but if we live life like we have an unlimited number of days, we really aren't going to soak it in as much. And there's a song by Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit called If We Were Vampires, and it's Jason Isbell and his wife Amanda Shires sing it. And as I've said on the show many times, I love them. But the title is If We Were Vampires, and it's saying basically, one of the lines is, if we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke, and we would live life so differently, right? If we knew that we were going to live forever. And the chorus is, it's knowing that this can't go on forever. Likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll be 40 years together, but one day I'll be gone, or one day you'll be gone. And that's a sad thought, but also the impact it has or can have on the way that we live in the moment and live to make other people's lives better and our own lives better at every moment is a really sweet and powerful thought, I think.
Yeah. Maddie and I talk every now and then about, I'm a good bit older than she is, and I'm a guy, and we tend to, on average, not live quite as long. And so, it's good odds that she's going to be without me at some point, and some chance that I'll be without her at some point. And acknowledging that, and I hope she won't mind me sharing this, but I've told her if that happens sooner rather than later, obviously I would appreciate if you take some time to grieve, but I want you to have a good life. I want Brielle and any other children we may be fortunate enough to have a good life. And I want her to move forward. I don't want her to, be grief stricken and non-functional for 15 years. And I don't think she would do that anyway. But I think her knowing that I support the process of her moving on with her life, if something should happen to me, is important. I think that's the unselfish way to live.
I do too. I think it's also important to say to each other, you don't have to say it often, but to at least have that conversation. Ryan, we've talked about this on the show before, but Ryan was engaged before we met and she passed away in 2001. And there's a lot of things that shaped a lot about Ryan. But one of the things that it did was it makes him very intentional about some of these conversations. So you would assume that your partner would know that you would want them to have a relationship after your passing, because of course you want them to be happy. But there's a lot of guilt and shame. There's a lot of challenges that come up when that happens. And so being intentional and saying, I would want you to have another relationship after I passed is an important just thing to say. Mm-hmm. So they know. So they're not guessing. Yeah.
Right. And it does go back to the conversation about our own mortality. And we just kind of spend a lot of time not thinking about that. And, I'm not saying that we need to spend a lot of time pondering our own mortality and thinking about death and what life will be like for others after we're gone. But I think coming to grips with that and thinking about its implications is important, because all of that is still going to happen regardless of whether we think about it or not. And considering how we can put pieces in place for the outcomes that we want, even after we're gone, it's important stuff, and we can choose to do it or not do it.
And live big in the moment. Ben, you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote that Maddie herself recommended from, to no one's surprise, Brené Brown. Good bull to Brené Brown, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
She's changed the way we think about so many things. Wholehearted living is about engaging with our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging.
We are enough. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Kyle.
Listeners.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.